Again, welcome to everybody here. We are very thankful that you have come and checked out our room. For those of you who are not yet familiar with us, for those that are in the speaker stage right now, we have actually four, including me, four mentors and a mentee joining us. This room is being sponsored by the Mentoring Club and Silicon Valley Startups on Clubhouse. And the Mentoring Club is a nonprofit organization based in California, Silicon Valley area. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and our mission is to provide a mentoring community for aspiring and seasoned leaders. Anywhere in the world, we help working people find mentors who can guide them to develop the skills they need to achieve their career and life goals. We help mentees fulfill their goals through meaningful work that creates positive impact in the world. So we believe that when we're doing meaningful work, then the leaders in us come out, and we're looking for mentees who are at that stage of recognizing their leadership potentials. And as they become successful leaders themselves, our dream is for them to become mentors to others. So we have been working on our career and life journeys of mentors for the past couple of months. And for today, we will go ahead and feature Sanjeev Nair, and Hong is our host for this session. Go ahead, Hong.
I would like to welcome our mentor being highlighted, Sanjeev Nair. Sanjeev is an entrepreneur and a designer and a mentor in the Mentoring Club with having worn many hats. And tonight we're going to highlight his life and career journey. Welcome, Sanjeev. Any opening statement before we get started?
Thanks, Song, for having me here, and Liesel too. I'm just waiting to see what you have dug up for me now.
No trick questions. That's a promise.
Yeah.
Uh, all right. So let's get started. With that, let's start from the beginning. How did you get started with a job or a career? How do you remember the first job or career that you had?
Yeah, this is a very interesting way. I kind of happened into the entrepreneurship journey pretty much by default or by chance. I started working when I was just out of school. I think I was about 16 or 17 at that time. And due to the sudden demise of my father at the time, I had to jumping into the deep end of the pool, so to speak, and learning to swim after that. Pretty much got into entrepreneurship in that way. My first job was pretty much in the area of sales. My dad had a dealership that was dealing with foundry chemicals, and we were in a small town in India, which was a foundry town. Luckily, I had been with him on a few of his business on a few days along with him, and I had observed how he operated. So with those few experiences of having seen him engage in business, I went with that. That kind of gave me a bit of confidence, so to speak, because when you're young, you're very confident. And I jumped into that and kind of just took on and tried to do what the best I could at that time. Pretty much to answer your question, my first job was directly to handle a business that suddenly was without a leader, so to speak, and I had to kind of, along with my elder brother, figure out how to go about it.
Wow. How was that experience? So yes, what happened? Yes, thanks for sharing that with us. And that sounds fairly traumatic and dramatic at the same time. How was that experience?
Yeah, it was like a wake up call because at that age, when you're 16, 17, you're not really thinking about working, right? You're thinking
Mm,
about having fun and fooling around with your friends and doing all kinds of stuff. Nothing prepares you for a life changing event like that. And especially when suddenly you are faced with responsibilities and you still are not at an age where you can make sense of responsibility. Internally, you are conflicted about why me, that angle happens. On the other side, you know that, okay, you need to do something because you have to move ahead. And I think that came in because I saw my dad work on the business right in the beginning. He used to work in a very large company earlier. He decided to take a step away from a cushy job and get into business. And I remember when I think I was in my eighth or ninth, and I asked him, why is he doing that? And he said, no, that's something, and he had at that time told me that there's nothing better than being the master of your own journey, right? Through and through. You control your destiny. You, based on the decisions you make, the vision you draw out for yourself, and you walk that path. So you feel super satisfied when you achieve things that way. And he said that that's what he wanted to do. He had developed the experience over many years of working in companies. He was great at marketing. He was a marketing manager in a very large enterprise, and he took a step there. And so all that stuff played into the positivity that I could actually kind of build on. And of course, my brother, who was elder to me, and he was doing his MBA at that time. So he was also still in college. So both of us, we actually kind of supported each other through that whole journey at that time, and got along with it, got into it pretty much.
Mm, right. Yeah. So that's I think for me, in any case, my model, my golden path in terms of career is to start out in sales, and it seems like that's where you started.
Yeah.
With that, I do know you for being a UI person and very much steeped in technology. So
Yeah.
when did that first happen for you? When did you start noticing technology? When did technology started to appear in your career?
It's a very interesting question. And I think there's one of the key attributes for anybody who's an entrepreneur is you need to be super curious. And
Mm,
that being super curious also is very necessary for anybody who's into the creative side of things, because you need to experiment. It's like when you're playing with colors, you add colors. And there is, for example, when you're doing
mm,
acrylic painting, there's a concept called pouring, wherein you pour the paint onto a canvas and then you just tilt it and work it around so that it gives you different patterns. You have no control over what patterns get generated, and it's a very beautiful end
mm,
result that you'll see, which you cannot do with a brush. So,
mm,
but then you have to be curious, right, to mix the right colors and stuff like that. When I was working initially in sales, it was more for survival. It's not something I really wanted to do. It was not something I enjoyed, right? But
mm,
I had to do it to get by. So the moment I scaled up and started doing my engineering, I was already kind of phasing out of that. I
mm,
had scaled the business to a pretty decent level wherein I could have a person who was running the show for us. I didn't have to go and do sales. I had renegotiated our engagement terms and the commission statement, commission agreements with the products we were selling to make sure that I didn't have to get involved on a regular basis. And I was focusing more and more on activities in college. And I was part of the sports team and doing, typically trying to be involved in the college because that's where all the action is, right? You need to build your peers that are doing certain things. You can't be all the time away. So, those things happened. And I slowly started thinking about what to do next. A friend of mine and me, we got thinking about what do we do? Something interesting. We participated in one of the college annual functions wherein we have something called a fun fair in India. I don't know what you call the concept here in the US, but the fun fair is basically every class comes together, they can bid for stalls.
mm,
You can actually create stuff or you can sell stuff. It's like everybody visits the college on the day. It's an off day. You can actually have a game where people pay to play the game and things like that, right? It's like a fair.
mhm,
And what
mhm,
we did is going into an area where you get a sense of how we were thinking at that time. So we had in our class most pretty girls, okay, that everybody was wanted to talk to. In India, because
mm,
boys and girls are not always, the social construct is different. So not everybody's is comfortable enough to go and approach a girl and talk to them. So what we did is we had a stall that was selling roses, okay,
oh,
and
wow.
the and the roses were manned by the girls who are in our group of people, right? From our class, and they're the prettiest
Mm,
girls around. So the boys
mm,
used to come to the stall, buy the roses, and give it to them itself. So,
mm,
so we had a fantastic store where the inventory never died because the inventory came back
mm,
to us itself, and we made some serious monies at that time. So we think, and this is an idea we thought of. We said, okay, who do we have to man the? So we convinced the girls to man the store, and
mm,
our I think our booth kind of recovered the money and much more and stuff like that. So we were always coming up with all these crazy ideas very early in college.
mm,
And that led to also actively participating in events in college. So
mm,
doing plays, doing dances, doing fashion shows, dressing up people and all this stuff. And at that point itself, I started thinking about design on the stage. How do you create the experience? How can we wow the audience? Our shows were looked forward to in college itself.
Hmm.
So by the time we were in fourth year of engineering, we started doing event management, wherein we started launching products. We started talking to small companies. We've launched cars, we've launched bikes, we've done through our network of people that we knew in nearby larger cities, we could get rock bands to come and play at concerts. We did a lot of stuff. At that age, you were like, nothing is going to stop you. So we just went all out. There was no fear, and we just started doing that stuff. Long story short, once I started doing events and I had to travel to the largest cities to get sponsorships, that's when I met a friend of mine who was running a technology company in a city called Pune, which is about 250 kilometers away from the city I was working in. And he suggested, and he used to meet me every time I went there, and he knew how I was hustling. And he said, "You're wasting your time in a small city. You should move to the big city and you should apply this skill into technology. There's so much more stuff we can do with technology." And I was absolutely unaware of the potential at that time. So he was my first, in a way, guide, person who kind of pivoted my thinking and put me in the direction of technology.
Mm.
So I know it is a long-winded answer, but yeah, I had to give a narrative of the thinking process, right? You're always hustling, figuring out what next. And
Right.
it's only much later in life I realized that I was always creating experiences all along the way. It was not about, and that's why my life journey has always been about that too. If you look at my whole journey across the various companies I worked with, it's never about a specific technology. It's always about the end result most of the time.
Which is the experience
Yep,
in terms
which
of
is the
end
experience.
results, right? More than
Yeah.
products.
Yeah.
Quite fascinating. Yeah, very special, definitely. With regards to technology, what were the first technology that you were exposed to, and did that make any difference, or it doesn't matter? It just what you were exposed to and what you worked on, or did it matter? So, what was it, and did it matter?
It did matter in a way that I had no clue about how websites work at that time.
Mm,
I just had an understanding, a very rudimentary understanding of the internet. I knew that the internet was the future. I knew how to connect to the internet using a dial up modem. I knew I could see how information was available on the browser, and that's about it. But I did not know how the designs were created at that time. I did not understand Photoshop, etc. I was not focused on, in fact, delving into the
mm,
whole realm of HTML or understanding how pages are made and stuff like that. Once my friend kind of told me to take a look at it, the first thing I kind of went into was search engine optimization, because he
mm,
said marketing, this is how marketing works on the internet, this is the future of marketing on the internet. And then he asked me to take a look at how these directories are built. You had directories, even Google was a directory, or Yahoo was a bigger search engine at that time. You have directory listings that you had to kind of enable to get your site searchable on Yahoo. So you had to apply through a submit a link, and then it went through a manual review process, and you could actually email those people to check on the status of it. And that's how you got your business listed under a specific directory, and the directory was tied into the search on Yahoo, and that's how the system was. So I kind of went into that aspect of it. How do you make your business more visible? How do you market better? And I kind of learned the ropes there. That's where I started, really, not in design. I scaled up to design as a second stage when I started my first consulting gig, consulting one of the largest media companies in the state I was in India at that time. I was part of the team that drew out the whole plan on how the site should look. And there too, I was not involved with the tools at that time. I was more involved in terms of what should the content be, how should the content be seen, what should happen, what kind of content, and how will people use it. And that's where I started liking the whole concept of thinking about how users are going to click and see. What do they click on? Why will they click on it? It came to me fairly naturally at that time. It's only later on that I said, okay, fine. Now, how do we build on this? And then you start looking at the tools.
mm, mm, mm. Wow. So you're a natural. I mean, coming up from events and looking at the the experience of the audience or the user, so things come naturally for you to. I guess the word to use is empathy or something like that. That you have a deep empathy to the target audience or user.
Again, empathy is a
No.
term that has come up much later from a UX perspective. But at that time, if I have to
Mm.
be truly honest, we were not thinking about empathy at all. What
Uh-huh.
we were thinking about is, okay, simple example. In the event space, when I'm creating a ticket, that is a ticket that we are to sell, we actually design the ticket in a way that people should retain the stubs. We wanted to create a memorable event, so that people will retain the stubs and stick it into their yearbooks, that this was a great time they had it. How do you get somebody to, like what we do with photos? You had
Mm,
photo albums, but people didn't have photo albums. So we thought that, okay, we need to make events or create experiences that are so awesome that people retain the ticket stubs and remember the events later on. That should be the memorabilia that they have, things like that. I think what came to me naturally was the whole thought about how is the user going to experience it. What should users feel when they walk into a realm that you create? And I think that natural extension of thinking helped me along the way when I started working with these companies that were trying to build their assets, digital assets.
mm.
The empathy fact came in much later. Rather, the empathy would have been there internally, but I think I didn't realize it is empathy. I read about it much later in a UX book.
Mm. Right. With that, since we refer to it so much without holding people on suspense for too long, so when did you start stepping into the UX UI world and that kind of thinking? Well, how did that happen? When did it happen?
The same story continues a little bit further. So my first gig was consulting this large media company. We set up their website. That time, during a period of a year and a half, I worked closely with an external design team that was creating the digital assets in terms of the banners and all the graphics for that website or the portals. That's what we used to call it that time. And I ended up looking at how people work these tools. That's when I first started dabbling in Adobe Photoshop. That is one thing. And the
Mm,
other thing I kind of got my hands or feet wet in, rather, is something called Dreamweaver, which was like a very early stage visual
right.
HTML or visual design tool, right? Which wherein you
Mm-hmm.
could just visually create the web structure, and in the back end it used to generate code. It used to generate pretty crappy code because the developers had a tough time kind of working with it. Of course, we were in very early stages of the overall technology, state of technology at that time. JavaScript and all those yet to really pick up in a big way. And once that happened, it was like, then I got involved in dabbling with a few projects on the side using those tools. And I had the privilege of having worked with some really, really great designers who are today in very high companies as design directors, etc. And at that time, they were also just out of design school and doing stuff. So I didn't go to design school ever. I was an engineer who had excelled in engineering drawing. I was always fascinated by drawing, and I taught my senior class, my friends who were in senior class and who had kind of lost out on a year because of failing a class. I kind of taught them engineering drawing after that. So
Mm,
it came to me naturally, I would say. But yeah, to your point, during that whole engagement with the media company and having worked with the design team, I kind of started understanding that the design is going to be so essential to really market a product better. Again, I come back to the whole concept of building experiences. So I started dabbling in with creating beautiful design and also functional design, because the HTML had its limitations. CSS was still not a big thing. So the challenges at that time were about creating really nice looking images, but making sure the size is very low, because the speeds at that time were really bad, right, in
mm,
terms of internet connectivity. So the load times on pages, you could not really overload any kind of a page with heavy graphics. And so there were a lot of work being done there. Flash was a big thing. People are using Flash animations at that time. And the fancy stuff with animations was Flash, but Flash was quite heavy. I had a great chance of working with teams who were trying to solve those problems. So that was a really good, I would say, learning experience for me at that time.
mm-hmm. Wow, incredible. Yeah, so you travel through all these things technology wise and and design and space learning on the job as it is, and not just learning and performing on the job. With regards to that, so looking back, I mean, what do you consider to be your superpower?
I just mentioned this to somebody yesterday. I think my
Mm,
superpower is the ability to look at a product or a service experience and put myself in the shoes of the person that we are trying to sell that product to. So that I have the uncanny ability to quickly look at a product, let's say an interface, and question the method. Rather, one is you question who's going to use it, and then analyze it basis the persona of that user, the persona that is set up by the business probably, or by the designer, or by the UX strategist, whoever it is, or the product owner,
Mm,
and give them feedback on how the person may think when they use it or where they're coming from. So you need to obviously lead with why will they use it, right? And that why will they use it is has to be informed by who they are. So that process requires a bit of objective thinking, which comes to me fairly easily.
right. And that's an incredible superpower. Let me ask you this then. So since you have come to work in the US, so that's a significant cultural and social shift. How did that impact your reading of the user, right? Putting yourself in the shoes of the user. I think for the Indian market, that's one thing. And then coming here to the US and put yourself in the shoes of an American user. Can you describe the shift or and how did you adapt to that?
Culturally, it's a very different ecosystem. I'm learning every day, even now. When you're talking to people about problems that they're trying to solve and how they have identified the target audiences that they want to cater to, there's a lot of conversation we have about understanding motivations of users. So, what I do today is product market fit, right? We
Hmm.
kind of help startup founders validate product market fit. They'll have a hypothesis, and then we need to help them validate that. So a lot of it involves questioning the why, right? Again, I come back to the same thing that I said earlier, leading with the why. Why does a person do this? What motivates them? What are the biases they come into when they start looking at your product or your service, right? Biases can be derived based on the scenario they're in, based on their ethnicity or their background, socioeconomic background. Could be also biases can be generated basis the scenario they are in, time of day or night that they engage with their business or service, and things like that. So that's how you kind of question and you get information, and basis the information you need to then kind of distill your thoughts further, right? That's a process that I've been doing at all times. To answer your question, it has been a journey itself, because it's but I've been lucky that even when I was in India, I have worked with clients in Europe as well as clients in the US. So
Right.
I've had a little bit of an advantage that way in terms of understanding how people think. I am curious enough to analyze and research a bit into the cultural side of the markets that my clients have been working in. So that has helped. Again, I would like to underline that the learning never stops, and I'm still learning every day. People have perceptions about different things, and those perceptions are always changing too. You have to always remain curious.
Hmm. Right. Thanks for sharing. Very powerful shares. Now, with regards, let's say, uh, at this point, I don't want to drag this out too long, but I still want to cover a bit of your journey to complete it. Looking back, I mean, yeah, your journey through sales and events and technology and, and design, and now, the wider sense of product market fit. Now, looking back over that whole long journey, what advice would you give to your younger self as a young person back in India? Is there a particular advice you would want to give to your younger self?
Okay, this is interesting.
Or
Yeah,
none at all? Or maybe the advice is just move on and enjoy the ride and then keep learning. Maybe, who knows?
I have,
What would you
yeah, no,
say?
no, I have. So that's something I always did. I've always enjoyed the journey. I've always followed my heart pretty much in whatever I've done. A lot of
Hmm.
times when I think about it, I've not really thought through a few things sometimes
Hmm.
early, and that's fine because you make those mistakes, you learn from it, and you, as long as there is some learning, whenever you fail, also it's great, right? The learning has to happen. But there were times where I hesitated. You listen to your inner voice many a time, but there are times when you're young that you also tend to listen to what someone very elder may say to you. And that's a cultural thing. And I would say to my younger self, believe in yourself 200%.
Hmm.
You believe in yourself once, that's it. You just that stick to that. It works. Even if things don't go the way you thought it would, it's okay. Have that conviction, drive at it, and make sure that you also have be honest enough to look at what the failings are and analyze it well, right? It's all you. That's it. There's nobody else who can change the result of your actions that way, really. It's you have to take the steps. You have to get your hands dirty and do that way.
Mhm. Right. Please help me understand that well. The way I look at it myself is first of all, trust and rely on yourself through the whole journey, including the failures, as you mentioned,
Yeah.
because you are your own meaning maker, right? And you need to be making meaning, and you're the only one to be making meanings for yourself, and that's why you need to do that. Am I correct? Am I reading you correctly, or are you thinking differently?
There was a time in my journey wherein I had the opportunity to do something which would have taken me down a certain path that surely would have made me successful, but in a completely different field, right?
Hmm.
Which I was at that time heavily focused on. I came across an elderly gentleman who has been in that field for a long time. I don't want to get into who and why and stuff.
Hmm.
Who kind of discouraged me about that whole trade because he himself not had a very great experience. I allowed his whole bias and his whole opinion to have an overbearing influence on my decision at that time, which I regretted later for some time. Had I gone down that path, I would have been okay having taken the decision based on my convictions that I can do it. And then even if it did not work out, it would have been okay. For a few years, I went into a little bit of a negative space where I didn't feel good about it. I started internally blaming the person for having misguided me a little bit. And
Hmm.
that's not a great place to be in. It took me a little bit of time to come out of that. And I think, and that's what I'm talking about.
Right.
So I would tell
Understood.
my younger self, no matter what anybody says, follow what your heart is saying to you and just go ahead with full conviction. And then you can face the consequences of what you do much better that way.
Hmm. Understood. Now, the next, which is next to last question now for me, the next question, which follows that logic, is this. So, you are a mentor now in the mentoring club, and you have clearly you have mentees. I think probably not just in the mentoring club, but elsewhere as well. Do you have particular approaches or advice or themes that you want to impart to your mentees? You do have advice for your younger self, to believe in yourself and learn from your mistakes and move forward. Does that apply to your mentees? I mean, do you have a philosophy or advice to your mentees
No,
generally?
absolutely. I very consciously make it a point to invoke curiosity amongst the mentees that I work with. The idea is to have a conversation so that they start thinking in a certain way, right? They start thinking about the problems that they're faced with. It's never about giving a solution, right? It's always about lighting the spark and see how it goes. To my previous point, for any entrepreneur or any person, if you take a decision that is purely based on your internal realization of something, you own it
Mm,
subconsciously or consciously, right? You own it completely, and then you will be able to much better process and deal with the outcomes of that decision. And I think that
mhm,
is a very important thing for anybody in life in general, not just entrepreneurs, right? How do you make sure that you analyze the data that you have, analyze the situation you're in, and take a decision, and then fine, deal with the outcome of the decision? That's what I try and kind of ensure people have a clear understanding of.
mm. Fabulous. Fabulous. Thank you so much for sharing with us. Now, the very last question, which is sort of the generic question for this kind of session. Now, if you were to write a book about your journey so far, what would be the title to that book?
I never thought about this.
Sorry to catch you by surprise there.
I like the whole concept of leading with the why. That's something I practice every day. Almost every conversation I have has that statement. Why? So if
Mm,
someone comes to me and say, I want to do this, my first question is why?
mm,
Why do you need to do it? A, or why will this work?
mm,
Why will your user use it? Right? So I think that line of questioning has helped crystallize not just my own understanding, but a lot of it has also helped navigate product journeys, service journeys, business or decision making, and everything. And that's something that is not spoken about enough by a lot of people. When I talk about product market fit, right? The biggest challenge, the biggest problem we've identified is that founders do not question the why. They love technology, they lead with features, They build fantastic products and
Hmm.
they think that users will come and buy it or use it and they'll be an overnight success, but they never question the why. They never validate the why. And many a times, the whole journey about you launch a product, you realize that users are still not taking to the product as you expected, and then you kind of figure out why. You dive down into it, you realize that the motivations and the expectations of users are mismatched to what you thought or assumed, right? So I think it's very, very important to lead with the why. It's like how kids are, right? The
Hmm.
curiosity we have as kids, we lose it somewhere on the way because we kind of are taught to conform to certain rules, methodologies, frameworks, but we forget the basics that be curious, question everything you see. You don't
Hmm.
need to question it with a saying that why, with a negative connotation to it. Question it out of purely out of curiosity to see what you can learn from it and then see how things go. I think it really opens up a lot of possibilities.
Wow, fabulous. Yes. Some people approach it with so what or something like that, but why is really fundamental. Great. Thanks so much, Sanjeev, for sharing with us tonight. Any closing statement at this point before Lisa close the room?
I want to
Thanks.
thank you and Liesel for this. I think Liesel is doing a fantastic thing with the mentoring club, and I really hope we can see more and more mentees and mentors come on board and we do a lot of interesting things. And the whole idea of the community is obviously to share as well as learn and as well as help people get to their milestones, whatever it is, right? Even if we are a small part of that, it gives, at least me personally, immense joy when I see anybody taking any advice or any guidance and closing out on a milestone. It gives me immense joy, and that's the journey pretty much at this time. Thank you so much.
And with that, I thank you all again. It's been a great room. Thanks again, Hong and Sanjeev, and thanks for staying with us.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks
Thank
a lot.
you.
Thanks, On.
Thank you.